Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here, and welcome to our talk. So me and Sarah are here coming to tell you a story about the platforms that we built at the New York Times from both side of an operator and a customer. So I start with my intro. I'm an engineer, despite it's a platform engineer, DevOps engineer. There's a lot of titles that we can talk about nowadays. But I'm an engineer. I build platforms, and when I don't build platforms, I go in the ocean. So I love scuba diving. If you have recommendations, let's start with that after the talk, your first question. Hand off to Sarah.
Hey everyone, my name's Sarah Duncan. I'm a staff software engineer at the New York Times. I specifically work on content personalization, thinking about personalization and how we personalize surfaces like the homepage, story pages, things like that. So I've always been a bit of a data nerd. I come from a data platforms background, so platform engineering is very near and dear to my heart. And I want to tell you a little bit about the New York Times before we get into a bit of the story that Ahmed and I want to tell. So at the New York Times, our mission is simple. We seek the truth and help people understand the world. And we aim to do that by building an essential subscription bundle for English-speaking, curious people who seek to understand and engage with the world. That means a lot of different products. We're probably most known for our news, maybe for our games, if there are some Wordle fans out there. But we have a lot of different products, and a lot of those products were developed very quickly at different times. Some of it has legacy systems involved. Some of it is very new, feels very much like a startup. And as the product portfolio grew and technology teams kind of grew as well, we started to have a lot of teams making very localized decisions for their specific product. And though that can be fun, it started to become clear that there was going to be more and more use cases where teams were going to need to build things like APIs. And so we wanted to think about what that should look like across the company. So in those early days, we had a bit of what I call the choose your own adventure of API development. And these localized decisions, like anything in software engineering, had a lot of trade-offs. So for some of the benefits, it could be really fast. Sometimes you just want to spin up your own API. You don't want to have to ask anybody for permission. Developers know a lot about the ins and outs of their own system. So if you ask an engineer about the system that they developed, hopefully they know something about it. But it also comes with some drawbacks. Sometimes it can be really slow. Maybe your team gets stuck in a decision loop of, are we going to build this API in Java or in Python? Where are we going to deploy it? What's it going to use? We also see a lot of knowledge silos that are created. Sometimes that's not so bad, but when thinking about on-call situations or QAing something end-to-end and you want to know how something works, that can make things really difficult. And that kind of lack of standardization across the company also led to a reduced level of support from engineers internally. So we have a developer platform team. That's where Ahmed's going to come in a second. And that team does a lot of really wonderful things. But when we start to get into spaces where there are dozens of languages in production, logs and traces go to every provider you could imagine. The different configurations aren't the same. We're on different cloud tools. We deploy with different things. Sometimes even within one tool, we have custom bash scripts or custom plugins. There's just not a lot where you can look at a system and expect to see some kind of template. And that made it really hard to support all the different product teams like mine, where every team has their own setup, and you're not necessarily going to get support from the developer platform team on every single permutation of all these different things. It just starts to become unruly and unreasonable. This is a bit of a visualization of how crazy it could get, and it has gotten. So going from that kind of chaotic space, what we wanted to do was start to introduce more templates, start to introduce more of a shared sense of strategy. And we did that a lot through standardization and starting to standardize what cloud tools we're using, how we're doing CI/CD, what programming languages we're using, and how we're configuring our systems. And that's, with that kind of template in mind, that shared strategy, we then passed it over to our developer team or developer platform team to think more about how to turn that idea into something that was more of a reality.
Thank you, Sarah. So now when we start designing a platform internally, like we have multiple teams. Like the teams and the organization didn't came from a vacuum to like, hey, let's build a platform. Like our organization has been like, we have a CI/CD team, we have like a cloud team, we have like a edge team. Like we have many teams and we have been like doing this for a while. The problem is how to serve all of these together. So we've been like doing like, sure, our CI/CD team support our pipelines for like few years. Our compute team supports like a lot of infrastructures that we built at the time. But like when you look at it, it's not all visualized together. So what are we trying to do here? Like from a platform team perspective, what are we trying to look at? Like we want to have governance in place. We want to be able to tell like what is best practices and what's not best practices. We want to have a standardization into the ways that we do things so we can scale it faster when we need to. Like instead of like every time we deploy an application, we try to iterate over and over through the things that we've been doing for years. Like can we just like take it a step forward and like make application creation faster? We want to have our infrastructure the same. Like we want to be able to do BIM backing on scale. Like we don't want to have like everyone think like, oh, what is the right EC2 machine for me? What is the right database type for me? Like these are questions like make the process take too much time when you start to create an application. From a product team perspective, they still want to be able to, like they don't want to go through Jira tickets. Like I want to create a service. I want to be able to go create my service. I don't want to have to wait for anyone to do that. So transforming that has to be like through a platform that orchestrates the whole process. They also focus on feature delivery. So they don't focus really into like, what is the infrastructure needed for that? They're just like, I have an application, I have a service, I want to host. It's an API. Like, you really scale it, you really manage all of the resources behind it, but like, I want to focus on my business logic. That's where we come into a situation like that. So we looked at what engineers look into when they start to create a service, when they start to build a new product. And what we have seen is like, there are a few steps here that you can see, but the common ones are like, the creation, the code, the build, like all of these are common. Like the plan and the idea might be different from a perspective on like how they create a service. Is it a payment service? Is it like a subgraph? Is it something else? Like depends. But like most of the other processes are like really the same. Like they want to have the same monitoring, they want to have the same release process. And this makes it easier for like managing all of the expectation around that. So our design goals being like standardization. We want to standard a lot of the stuff. We want to take like all of the language frameworks that we have at the company and just focus on a few of them to make it easier. We want to like focus on efficiency instead of like bugging teams like, hey, your cloud spend is too high because like your requests and limits are not the right thing to do. Like we will take this over and like we provide the best practices and give you all of that information to go through it. We want to have integrations between different points. Like we don't want to have our CI/CD too isolated from our compute, too isolated from our edge perspective. We want to have like an encapsulation of all of that together. So I'm creating a service. I get all of the processes around it. Scalability, we scale the platform. You don't worry about the infrastructure. You worry about your business logic. When I talk about scale here, it's not just scaling the infrastructure, also scaling the feature delivery. If like we are building something like feature flags, you don't have to think about as a product team to build your own feature flag set. We'll build that in the platform and then provide to you as a service. So you have to keep focus on like that business logic that you are building for your application and not the tooling. And visibility is another thing, is like one important aspect here is like how we deliver monitoring and observability to our teams. So sometimes you might like have an API that it's working, but like you don't get like understanding of like what's really happening between this API and the other API. So you're only focused on like what you deliver. Like when we look at from like holistic approach, if you look at entry for the request and the exit at like the last thing, there's like maybe 100 servers in between. If you are focused only in yours, you don't know like what's happening before and after. So we're trying to bring all of this visibility together. And that requires like for us to build like a strong data model between all of the components that we have. So we need to make sure that like we understand what a system means, how the system fits into an application or a service, like where this application is deployed, Is it deployed as a workload? Is it in Kubernetes? What kind of runtime? For us to being able to govern in the whole process, we need to have all of these entities built into the platform so we can be able to tell who's using what, what's happening at any time, and also like make it standard around the organization. So we came up with that platform workflow. So we have that workflow, been in the company for about like 2 or 3 years now, and that helps us like going through like all of the steps in a few seconds. And what's happening here is like a user comes in, create like their application. So they start by like, hey, I want my application built in Go. Like click, 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 gets created. Behind the scene, I will show you later like the steps that they go through from like a creation process, but this is what they see. They know that they will get a GitHub or will get a repo or a source control, have all of their stuff, CI/CD, all of the steps here, but they get all of this out of the box, so they don't have to really think about what really necessarily happening behind it. There's a lot of Kubernetes, there's Envoy, there's different things that happens here, but they don't really need to like look at all of that. We just like ship all of these things out of the box. So this is a design. This is how we are designing our system. So we came up with this like beautiful design, beautiful strong data model, all of the good things that like we want to do as a platform engineers. But like you come to reality and then like you quickly find out that like it's not the same. Like what you build might not apply perfectly. Some of the diagrams that I have shown might be in an earlier stage. Some of them might be like from a later stage after we fix some of the stuff. So one of the things that like our first, I'll talk more about the runtime from that perspective because that's where I'm coming from as my area of expertise. The first thing that we came from a design, sure, like we know we're gonna do runtime. We decided on Kubernetes for various reasons. I'm not going there. But then like first thing, like, like we're doing this for a whole team, a whole organization. Are we giving like each team their own clusters? Are we doing like a multi-tenant clusters? Where are we going with that? How to do it? And like we have to spend some time on it. Like it might be one slide, but I believe it took me a few months with the team to figure out like which approach that will work for us from an organization perspective. And each of them has its pros and cons. So like it depends on the organization, it depends on where you want to go with it. Like we started like years ago with a single cloud account that might work for everyone, but like things evolve and we cannot do this anymore. So we started to like have a federated account set up, but that like, how can we make this work for Kubernetes? So we ended up with something like this, which is basically a multi-tenant runtime Kubernetes cluster that we serve namespace as a service. So each team gets their namespace and gets their deployment application into like their like multi-regional cluster, and they don't even have to worry about this. Like we handle all of the infrastructure behind the scene, and you can see like different components as Cilium, Carpenter, Istio, OPA, and other things that like we built out of the box. So we can deliver this experience to the teams. And from there, like the one thing that like we liked about this architecture is like we started to centralize the operation across the entire stack. So like we did have many tools, but like teams didn't have to go through the life cycle of like, oh, I'm gonna start to go create my GitHub repo, and then like I have to figure out how to deploy my application and create my pipeline and do all of that kind of stuff. So we as a platform team have all of the operation of that. We big the tools that like we see fit from a different perspective. Some teams use different tools, so we have to find like hooks and how we integrate it with them. So from there, like we started to dissect it in like a view for like what is the developer space, like what they need to interact with. And from our perspective, they interact with IDE, but then like there's like some application definitions that we give to them, plus that we have our interfaces for like our platform from an API, UI perspective, and we also have like the platform space, which we build like all of the CI/CD and all of the tooling, and then the infrastructure part out of it. And from there, I wanted to show you a demo of the service creation, but like, you know, things don't go as you expect. So this is another one. I had a video, but I noticed this morning that the video is not gonna show up. So let's skip the video, and I can show you offline about that. Clicked something. Did it click? Okay. So the service creation flow, what I wanted to show you is the actual demo out of like how it's created, but I will show you like how it's been done. So I brought a team team comes to our backstage, which is like our IDB. They say, hey, I need an application, like a minute. They fill a form. And then this form triggers to all of that life cycle. What this life cycle is behind the scene is like, we have an API that takes all of the inputs, start to create like all of the required CI/CD pipelines, all of the application manifest, everything out of the box, and then ship to them like a full ready deployment in a specific stack into like what they needed to build. They can come with Docker or like say, hey, I don't know what I'm gonna build yet, so just give me an image to build this through. Or like they know I will build this service in Go or in Python, and then like just give me the template for that. And literally that shifted how we build an application or a service in the New York Times, because it used to take us like maybe a few weeks, like to get something really. It's not about like getting something working, but it's getting something like ready for production runtime, or like as they say, prime time. It's about the logs, it's about like the monitors, it's about like making sure that can scale, does it have all of the impact that like we need to do. So all of that gets delivered right now in about like a few minutes, where like all of the life cycle happen to this. And from there, I want to pass it to Sarah to talk more about like how they are building on the platform from their perspective.
Thanks, Ahmed. So all that work that Ahmed and team put into putting together this platform really helped us in the work that I'm doing for content personalization. So a bit of context around this use case that we had. Last year, we were starting to invest more into GraphQL federation, and as a part of that, my team was going to need to move parts of a GraphQL API out of a monolith and into our own subgraph. The traffic was going to be starting at around 400 requests per second for what we were migrating initially, but we knew that that was going to easily scale to about 1,000 requests per second, and as more and more use cases come together, this was going to serve a few different parts of the graph. That was going to only end up scaling more and more. We are serving content to readers. Obviously, we're the New York Times. But the part of this subgraph was going to be responsible for parts of the homepage and parts of the story pages and things that get a lot of high visibility. So it was really, really important that the system be able to scale, that it was highly available, and that we were able to think through different levels of failover and fallback. For my team, like I said before, I come from a data platforms background, so I've done a Terraform file or two, have a bit of infrastructure expertise, but most of my team is full stack web engineers who are very, very gifted and just don't have a lot of experience in Terraform or in infrastructure. So we needed this API. We needed to be able to migrate traffic to it, but we had really isolated levels of expertise on the team. And so part of the beauty of this platform that we were able to use is that we didn't really need to have a lot of infrastructure expertise on the team. As much as you do want to dive into it, you can. I'm interested in it, so I love to figure out how things are working. But there's a lot that you can just kind of accept out of the box, and a lot that I accept out of the box. And so when we were actually building it, like Ahmed was just mentioning about that initial setup phase, that was really, really a huge selling point for us in using this internal platform. That we didn't have to do a whole bunch of copy pasting, copying from this repo for this file, copying from that repo for this file. We just went through this setup, and we had a CI/CD pipeline. We had configuration files for deploying our API in this multi-tenant Kubernetes cluster. That was all given to us. And we were able to do that all within an existing monorepo that we worked in, which was a really important thing for us, that this wasn't going to be hugely disruptive to our workflow. With the hosting that's set up on Kubernetes and with the auto-scaling in place, we really didn't have to do anything. The routing URLs were there, all the security best practices were there, the networking layer is there. And that was also a huge win for us, that we didn't have to figure out how these configurations were going to work. And anywhere where we did have questions, we were able to reach out to the developer team that built it and get those questions answered very quickly. And then we were also able to scale automatically. So having a configuration where we could set some min and max, we have some best practices out of the box, but that's something that we can adjust. That really became important as we started to see more and more traffic towards this product. And then we get into iterating. Huge part of software engineering, huge part of platform development. And one of the ways that we were able to iterate really quickly because we were on this platform is that we were able to get these hosted preview and kind of like pre-production environments out of the box with this configuration. That was a really key feature for us that we were able to build into this workflow. We wanted to be able to test new features end-to-end without shipping to prod. Obviously, test and prod too, that's a whole other talk. But we wanted to be able to test and have a space where QA engineers could work before we launched something into production. And we were able to get that with the existing configuration files in this platform. Another really key thing was when we were starting to load test this service ahead of some big news events that were happening last year. Like whenever there's a known news event, we want to be able to scale and be able to test to make sure that our systems are going to be able to meet that level of traffic. As we were testing this relatively new API at the time, we noticed, as you might be able to see in the graph, that there were maybe some bottlenecks. And in investigating the observability that was built into the platform with the help of our dev platform engineers, we were able to notice where the bottleneck was. It was something with our networking layer, that we were kind of doing this extra hop. It was at least contributing to things, and we didn't have to do that extra hop. We could just hit an internal URL instead. And so we were able to add that network overlay to our deployment. Easy. Got it into the system, tested it again, and we saw the bottleneck go away. And in kind of doing that exercise together, that then became a standard network policy that was offered to other product teams with similar APIs, that for this specific kind of interaction, you don't actually need to go through an external URL. We've already gone through all those layers. We can just hit the internal URL. Here's the network policy to do it. And so that's where we get into feedback being a really key feature of platform development. Whether you're managing a platform internally, managing a platform for external clients, that feature of being able to receive feedback, quickly iterate, and really collaborate together on that contract that you share and the different like features and offerings that you have, that becomes really critical. And if that's like one of the main things that I want to share out of this talk is that like level of feedback is really, really key. Another thing that we started to develop more as this platform became more widely adopted internally was we iterated on our tech standards. So besides working on this platform together, Ahmed and I also work on tech standards at the New York Times together. And we've gone through multiple iterations of what tech standards look like, what those standards are. But as we develop the platform more and more internally, it's also really important that we develop our standards and that our standards can evolve kind of as the platform evolves.
I have 2 minutes left. Let me see if I can wrap it up quickly.
You got it.
So, like one thing that is important, like might not go through the slides, but like it's very important to focus on iterations. When you build a platform, it's not a project. It's a product. Like you will have multiple phases out of it. So like if something doesn't work today, I have seen the platform like 3 years for 3 years now. Like, and some stuff that we decided earlier on, we have to switch later. One of the things, like we started with customized. Worked for us for a while, being out of the box, but then like we have to switch to something faster, more abstracted. So you try to start from like least abstractions that you can get to until you get to a point where you are comfortable with all of the abstractions that you have to put in place. So customized to Helm is one, but then like scaling, we have to build a specific scaling. So what Sarah was talking about, like we are a news company, so like we send the breaking news a lot. So like if you are optimizing for cost or optimizing for different things, we have to build our own workflow. So to commission the infrastructure needed before even a news being sent. So we need to understand like how to do that quickly and efficiently, and we can roll this out on a platform level to make sure that like all of our services are accounted for. And this is more of like an architecture of like how we ship a complex feature to be a flag in your deployment. All you need to do is like scale me out when there's breaking news alert. That's all you have to do, rather than you have to work on the solution yourself. At the end, the one thing that it's more important is like you build a platform, you have to focus on a few things. First, users are very important to you. You have to partner with them. You have to document for them. You have to make sure that they're involved in your iteration. And you always have to ask for their feedback. Because while you know what are you doing as a platform engineer, you are building something for the user. And without that, you're not going to have a platform without any customers who are using it. With that, thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.